Bob's Railroad Workbench. Hello, I'm Bob Letzenberger. Mr. Bob, Director of Education for the National Railroad Museum. Welcome to Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, where we talk about math, science, history, and trains, and do it all with some very fun activities. If you're watching us live on Facebook and want to type in a question, well, feel free to do so. We'll answer those questions after our segment today. Also, if you just want to type in and let us know who you are and where you're watching from, we'd love to hear from you as well. And make sure that you like the National Railroad Museum's Facebook page. Well, today we are going to the very end of the train. We're going to go talk about the caboose. The caboose had a very special purpose on a freight train, and unfortunately we don't see them anymore today. We'll talk about that. If we go back to the beginning of railroading here in our country, the time before air brakes, the time before roller bearings that we have on railroad wheel axles today, on trains, to stop a train, a brakeman had to walk across the tops of the freight cars and set a brake wheel. Also, the axles, well, the metal axle was carried along in a metal cradle. And that metal cradle needed to be bathed in oil. It was called a journal bearing. If the oil ran too low, the axle, through friction, heat would build up, and the axle could actually melt off the end and fall out of the journal bearing, and the wheel could come off, and we could catch a train on fire. So, the caboose at the back end of the train had a purpose to be the office for the conductor and the brakeman, and from the caboose at that end of the train, they were able to, especially on a curve, look down the side of the train and see what was happening with those various journal bearings. Also, the brakeman had an easy point to begin his trip across the tops of the freight cars to set the brake wheels to slow a train down. Well, as time progressed, obviously journal bearings gave way to roller bearings, which mitigated the problem that we had there. Also, eventually air brakes came into being, and so those walks across the top of the freight cars, well, they became obsolete as well. Then the next thing that happened was the railroads began developing larger cars, like the one you see here, which if you look at line of sight from the caboose going forward, well, that larger car ended up blocking the vision from the caboose. So, a development that came about was a different style of caboose. Some railroads began developing cabooses that had a bay window on the side. The windows stuck out just a little bit from the side of the train, which allowed the conductor and brakeman to look forward as they were going around a curve. Pretty innovative idea if you think about it. Well, ultimately, air brakes came into being. Steam locomotives gave way to diesel locomotives, and the brakeman was no longer needed. The fireman was no longer needed on a train. That left for a train crew the engineer and the conductor, like we have today. Most cabooses weigh between 20 and 40 tons. If we get that caboose, since we had nobody to ride in it, we can obviously save that amount of fuel. So the conductor moved up to the cab of the locomotive, and the caboose went away in the mid-1980s. So what do we have at the back of the train today? Well, there's something back there called an end-of-train device. The one thing that we want to make sure of on a train is that we're all coupled together and that we have air pressure running through the train so that the brakes will actually work when they're supposed to. The end-of-train device monitors the brake pressure running through the train, and through a radio signal communicates that to the folks up in the cab of the locomotive. The end-of-train device in the mid-80s replaced the caboose. At the National Railroad Museum, we have 5 cabooses in our collection. Come and look and see the difference between cabooses with cupolas, with smaller cupolas, with wide vision cupolas, windows, all of them around our museum grounds for you to explore. But you know, also, if you'd like to have a caboose at home, well, we have something for you there as well. Each year, for our museum members, we have a painting done of one of the pieces in our collection. One of those that we have completed happens to be of Milwaukee Road Caboose 04 that is in our collection. And if you would like a print just like this one, visit our website, nationalrrmuseum.org. Click on the shopping tab and scroll down to books and artwork, and you'll find a print of one of the cabooses in our museum collection. So there from the back of the train, a little bit more about the caboose and why it went away from American railroad freight trains. You know, the National Railroad Museum inspires lifelong learning by providing dynamic educational opportunities through the preservation of railroad objects, engaging exhibits, and innovative programs. As a nonprofit educational institution, we are supported by both public and private donations and our museum members. For more information on how you can support the National Railroad Museum or become a museum member, please visit our website, nationalrrmuseum.org. And thank you so much for your continued support. Hey, I'm Mr. Bob. Thanks for visiting Mr. Bob's Railroad Workbench, and we'll see you again real soon.